I finally got a chance to sit down and play Daggerheart with some friends. And while we had a great time, there were some mechanics we really enjoyed, and others not so much. I want to talk about which of the game's ideas and concepts I was a fan of, and which I didn't connect with, so you can get a better idea of what the game has to offer. A couple quick caveats though. I don't have the full book and box set, but instead use the system reference document that's available for free online. This definitely seems like a game that's best played in person, with the physical cards and other resources that come in the full release. So that probably had an impact on my enjoyment of the game. Second, I've only ever played D&D, so keep that in mind when I talk about different mechanics that Daggerheart uses. Maybe they come from other games. Maybe there are TTRPGs that do them better. I have no idea, but I'd love to hear about their inspirations in the comments. Without further ado, let's get started. The core mechanic that Daggerheart revolves around is the Duality Dice. Whenever you take an action in the game, you roll 2 d12s, a hope die and a fear die. You then add them together, stack any appropriate modifiers, and declare your total, plus whichever one rolled higher. If the hope die was better, then regardless of success, players get a hope, which they can spend to power their various abilities. But if the fear die was higher, the GM gets a resource, which they can use to add danger and complications to the story. In theory, I liked the Duality Dice. It gave every roll a little extra meaning, knowing that in-game currency was being thrown around, and whenever they would fail but get hope or succeed and give me some fear, it felt a little different than just getting a binary result. Plus, crits in the game happen whenever you roll the same number on both dice, and in combat, they guarantee you deal a ton of damage, so that was really fun. Overall, the actual double dice rolling was something I enjoyed. How fear and hope were actually utilized, on the other hand, was a bit of a mixed bag for me. Not so much hope. On the player side, they had tons of fun ways to spend their tokens, whether giving someone advantage, teaming up, or powering their class abilities. That was all well and good. My real issue is with fear. Daggerheart is, in their words, a conversation. It wants to be a narrative game with mechanics that support the fiction. And spending fear is supposed to help GMs up the tension and challenge their players. And it definitely felt that way on their end. One of my players said that every time I got fear, it felt like things were building, and they knew later on it was going to come back and bite them. But personally, I thought the fear system sometimes got in the way of the natural give and take of collaborative storytelling. If you're playing D&D, you just describe what an enemy does to antagonize the party, or a scenario that prompts a player to make a saving throw. After you set up a scene, you become very reactionary to whatever your players are doing. In Daggerheart, sometimes you can do that, but other times you need to spend a fear, and balance whether or not it's worth using or how many times. It feels less like just following the natural beats of the story, and more like picking and choosing when to step in. When combat starts, fear plays an even bigger role, since a lot of your monster's powerful abilities will use it. If you have more than one enemy, you'll need to keep good track of how much fear you can spend on not just powering up their cooler effects, but then taking control of other combatants in the same turn. There was a part of me that enjoyed that little game within the game, managing my fear and finding the best ways to spend it, but it also meant that how I chose to use that limited resource had a much bigger impact on the challenge of the battle. The 2 fights I ran ended up being just fine, but I could see scenarios where, if I didn't get a lot of fear or spent it poorly, that could be a big hindrance. As a GM, I want my players to feel like they're fighting the monsters, not me. But by having to spend fear to jump in and act, rather than having a system which tells me when the enemies go and what they do, Daggerheart definitely blurs that line. So for those reasons, this one wasn't as big of a hit for me, but also wasn't a deal breaker, and I can see it resonating with a lot of GMs out there. One thing we all really did enjoy about Daggerheart though, was how specialized the classes felt. In D&D, a lot of classes, especially with their subclasses, can play the same roles in a party. Whether you want to be a healer, a frontline fighter, or a back row spellcaster, you could do any of those with multiple different options. In Daggerheart, each one feels really distinct. Part of that is because of more limited options, but I think they did a good job of giving their classes unique flavors and different niches to fill within a group. For example, one of my players chose to build a warrior, and they're the only class in the game that can make opportunity attacks when an enemy leaves their range. Not only that, they actually get different options for what that opportunity attack can do, instead of just damage. They really liked that, and so did I. Combine that with the fact each has access to 2 different domains, which are basically groups of abilities you can mix and match from to make your character even more unique, and I thought it was a cool system, so that's a big positive for me. Unfortunately, while each class felt pretty distinct, the stats each player had felt very similar. There are 6 character traits in the game, what D&D would call ability scores, and when you make a character, you assign each of them one of the following: +2, +1, +1, 0, 0, or -1. You then use one of these stats for every roll. So the difference between making a check you're supposedly really good at and one you're quite bad at is only 3 numbers. As you level up, you can add to your stats, but any one score can only increase by 3 across the entire game. So a fully maxed out character facing threats the world over will add a whopping +5 to a roll, if they've chosen to boost it up. It's worth noting that because you're rolling 2d12s instead of 1d20, your average roll is higher in Daggerheart than games like D&D, but it does feel like your success on any given check is based more on luck and how many other features you can use to juice your chances with things like advantage, than how you've chosen to build your character's stats. It gives the impression that any PC has basically the same chances of succeeding on a given roll as anyone else, especially at lower levels. And because there's no skills, you can't get into the nitty-gritty and really specialize in certain areas of the game. Whether you're persuading, deceiving, or performing, you still just use one score. I definitely prefer a system with more skills that lets you really pick and choose what your character is good at, so this part of the game wasn't for me. But let's talk more about combat, because there were some aspects I really enjoyed. First was encounter creation. It was very easy to toss together a fight that felt balanced and fun. Basically, there's a super simple equation based on your number of players to figure out how many battle points you have to spend, and each monster has a type that tells you how many points they're worth. So you simply pick an amount of level appropriate enemies to equal your total, and you're good to go. If you want an easier fight, spend less. If you want to really challenge them, you can use more. We only had 2 fights during our one-shot, but the encounter that I put together using this message felt pretty fair to me. That's a very small sample size, but I like how simple it was, and I definitely think it benefits new GMs or those that are just trying out the game for the first time and learning the balance. Thumbs up. Another part of combat I wasn't sure if I'd like going in, but ended up appreciating was the damage system. In Daggerheart, you only have a handful of hit points, but the way you're wounded is a lot different. When damage is rolled for an attack, you compare the total to 2 thresholds you have based on your class and choice of armor. If it's below your first threshold, you take 1 hit point worth of damage. Between both thresholds, and you mark 2 points. Above your second threshold, and you're hit for a full 3 points of damage. As someone who's used to having to count down from huge hit point sums, as both my D&D campaigns are in epic levels, this was really nice. And because different weapons use different dice and stronger monsters will deal more damage, it felt like there was a good balance between smaller blows and big hits. Couple that with an armor system where different sets give you different amounts of points that you can mark off to knock that damage down a level, as well as stress points your character can take to perform tough moves or as a result of actions at the table, and I really enjoyed this system for tracking health on both the player and GM side. Those were the parts of combat I really liked, but there were a few sticking points too. First was the lack of initiative. One of the big draws of Daggerheart is that there's no set turn order, allowing you to switch straight into combat and giving your players the freedom to act as often as they want. This sounds great in theory, but in practice, I think it created some confusion for us. Coming from the structure of D&D, it was almost too much freedom. I think as a group, we like having a very clear idea of what you can do on your turn and when, whereas Daggerheart invites you to do as much or as little as you want. Some parties will love that. Mine wasn't as excited by it. And even though there wasn't a set turn order, nobody wanted to hog the spotlight, so we largely ended up taking turns one at a time between them anyway, so there wasn't much of a difference between having rolled initiative or not, at least on the player side. Call it a skill issue if you want, and I'm sure with more practice we would have gotten used to it, but I think having a few more guide rails during combat would have been nice. On the GM side of things, the fear system comes into play again. If the players fail on a roll or succeed with fear, you have the option to steal the spotlight back from them and take a turn with one of your monsters instead. You can also spend a fear to wrestle back control whenever you want. So again, instead of the rules of the game saying, hey, it's your monster's turn to start making their lives hell, it's on you to pick and choose when to go. Beyond that, you can spend a fear point to have a second monster take a turn, and a third, so on and so forth. So how much fear you've managed to save up and how stingy you are with it has a big impact on which monsters actually get to act and win. Toward the end of the big boss fight I planned, I was definitely running a little low. In no small part because I chose a monster that you can spotlight up to 3 times by spending fear points. Of course, monsters have basic attacks they can do without using fear, but if you want the cool stuff, you'll need it. There's definitely a difference between giving GMs the freedom to choose when their monsters act versus the game telling them when to go and removing both that mental burden and responsibility. I wouldn't say I hated it this way, but I definitely didn't love it either. I didn't think I'd end up missing initiative, but I think there's a balance between a simpler system and none at all. There is an optional rule to track and cap how many times anyone can act in a given scene, but I don't think that really solves the problems we had with it. Daggerheart's version would probably grow on me in time, but for a single game, I just didn't gel with it very much. In a similar vein, your character doesn't have any set movement each turn of combat. Instead, you can choose to move between a few different ranges. Melee, very close, close, far, very far, or out of range. If you're within close range of wherever you need to reach to perform an action, which is described as between 10 to 30 feet, you can move as part of the roll. But if you're far or very far away, you need to make an agility roll to see if you can. I think the idea of having these ranges instead of set movements was to simplify things, but in practice it ended up complicating movement more than just having a defined speed. First, there are just too many designations for my liking. I don't think you need both melee and very close, just make melee range within 10 feet, especially since the game assumes you can move as part of an action between those two anyway. And why have both far and very far if you can succeed on an agility roll to move all the way to melee range from both? Keep in mind, it doesn't give you a score to beat for either of those rolls, so I'm assuming it's on the GM to decide what they need to hit and make it harder for longer runs. Some clarity would have been nice. They try to simplify it even more by comparing those ranges to some household objects you probably have lying around, like the length of a pencil or the long edge of a sheet of paper. But we were playing virtually. I can't really hold my pen up to a screen, so we went for their optional grid movement rules instead, which would have been easier if everyone just had a movement speed you could use, and the ranges of their actions were given in feet. I don't know. This was one where, again, with more time I'd probably adjust to it, but I think it's stuck between trying to have both set lengths in feet for crunchier play, and also be abstract enough for ease when using theater of the mind. I'm not sure it lands well on either side of the spectrum though. Back to the good. Tiers of play. There are 10 levels in Daggerheart, and they're split into 4 tiers. Level 1, levels 2 through 4, levels 5 to 7, and levels 8 through 10. Splitting up the game into these distinct sections doesn't just make it easy for players to understand what abilities they have access to, but it helps GMs prepare appropriate encounters because monsters are also grouped this way. It's a simple idea, but it's effective, and I like it. Good stuff. Speaking of tiers, there are also environments for each one that can help you run different scenarios, both in and out of combat. By using fear or GM actions, you could have a thief try to steal from the party in a busy marketplace, see if a player is pulled into a rushing river, or summon the guardians of a grove they're exploring for a confrontation. It's all pretty cool, and I can imagine these being really good guidelines for newer GMs who would like some help. But also, you could just do this stuff. I think it's almost restrictive for an experienced GM to feel like they need to use these mechanics to run exploration and environmental scenarios that they've probably done a bunch of times before in their own ways. So while I can see the use for these and do think they could be great inspiration for non-combat encounters, I also don't think they'll be for everyone. And personally, I'd probably just ignore them for the most part if I was running a longer campaign. Let's end on 2 good ones. First are the resting rules. Just like in D&D, you can take both a short or a long rest. But in Daggerheart, you have choices. Instead of just healing and having some abilities reset, you can choose between getting hit points back, clearing stress, repairing your armor, gathering hope, or working on different projects. You can only do 2 though, so choose wisely. And even the GM gets something, because you gain fear whenever the PCs choose to stop and rest up. It's a cool system that, over the course of a campaign, I can see being really fun to play with. And last but not least, death moves. Despite my best efforts, these ones didn't come up in our one-shot, but I still think they're worth mentioning because I really love the concept. When you run out of hit points, you actually choose what happens to your character. You can go unconscious like you would in D&D, but there's a chance you gain a scar and lose one of your hope slots. Or you can decide to embrace death, going out in a blaze of glory where you get to automatically crit on one GM-approved action and a last-second sacrifice. Great for those really desperate moments. And then there's your third option, where you risk it all by rolling both your hope and fear dice. If the hope die is higher, you spring back up and clear a number of hit points or stress equal to what you rolled. But if the fear die is higher, you're dead. End of story. That's incredible, and it really plays into Daggerheart's desire to be a tool for epic, dramatic storytelling. No notes, death moves are awesome. So at the end of the day, what do I think of Daggerheart? I enjoyed playing it, and would absolutely give it another go. I think it's a nice change of pace if you're looking for something with unique dice rolling and a currency system that changes up the usual GM and player dynamic. There are a lot of very cool ideas here, and I'll be interested to see how it evolves into the future. But that being said, would I want to run an entire campaign using it? Not so sure. I've played D&D for a long time, and it's hard to picture myself jumping ship just for Daggerheart. It's got too much going on to be the sort of simple, rules-light system that I might want to play short, less serious campaigns in, but for longer, narrative-driven ones, I like the structured combat, robust skill system, and overall more fleshed-out rules of D&D. So I'm not sure how much use Daggerheart will actually get at my table, but I'm glad I played. With all that said, would I recommend you try it out? Yeah, absolutely. The rules are totally free online, no cost at all. So if you have even a tiny desire to play, why not? give it a shot and let me know what you think. I'd love to hear if you agree with my takes or had a completely different experience with it. Thanks for watching, and thanks to my friends Carrie, Ryder, and Caleb for helping me playtest and sharing their thoughts. Couldn't ask for better players. If you enjoyed the video, leaving a like is always appreciated. And if you want to see more, you should subscribe to the Bard's College. I make videos about D&D, DMing, and everything in between, so there's more to come. But for now, good luck, and remember, crit your players.